moment Sarah unlocked the door to her new house, she knew it was perfect. Sunlight spilled through the bay windows, painting the hardwood floors gold. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved. At least, that's what she thought. Until she noticed him. Every morning, like clockwork, the man across the street would settle into his porch chair, steaming mug in hand. He never read a paper, never scrolled on his phone, just sat there, motionless, eyes locked onto her house. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Maybe he was just zoning out, lost in thought. But then she caught the way his gaze followed her, through the kitchen window while she cooked, past the blinds when she got ready for work. It wasn't casual observation, it was study. One Tuesday, she tested it. She waved, just a small, polite flick of her fingers. His reaction wasn't surprise, it was satisfaction. A slow, knowing smile curled at the edges of his mouth, like she'd finally played her part in some game only he understood. That night, she double-checked the locks, pulled the curtains tight, told herself she was being paranoid. But then, as she climbed into bed, her phone buzzed. A notification from her doorbell camera. Motion detected, front porch. The live feed showed nothing, just an empty stoop. Then, in the corner of the screen, a shadow shifted near the hedges. Too tall to be a cat, too still to be the wind. And right as the alert timed out, a glint of light caught her eye. The faint red ember of a cigarette, burning in the dark. Across the street, his porch light flicked on. The chair was empty. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at the window, watching, waiting. By dawn, the chair was occupied again. This time, though, something was different. His coffee mug sat untouched, and in his lap, a notebook, pages splayed open. Even from a distance, she could see the frantic scribbles, the sketches, the way his pencil kept darting up, not to sip his coffee, but to trace the lines of her silhouette against the glass. The next morning, the notebook was gone. In its place, a single envelope wedged into her mailbox. No stamp, no address, just her name, written in ink so fresh it smudged under her thumb. Inside, a Polaroid, her bedroom window, taken from his porch, and beneath it, 3 words, "I see you." Sarah told herself not to open it. The envelope sat on her kitchen counter for 3 hours, its crisp white surface glaring at her like an unblinking eye. But curiosity gnawed at her resolve, and when she finally slid it open with a butter knife, the contents made her blood run cold. It wasn't a threat. That would have been simpler. Just a single line, written in neat, looping script. "You look pretty in blue." Her hands trembled as she dropped the paper. She hadn't worn blue since moving in, not once. The next letter arrived 2 days later, slipped under her front door while she slept. This time, the words were typed, impersonal, yet somehow more invasive. "Your dog barks at 3:17 a.m. A chill crawled up her spine. Max had barked that night, a sharp, startled sound that woke her. But it had only happened once, when she'd knocked over her sleeping pills and the bottle clattered across the floor. No one could have heard that. No one outside, unless they'd been listening at the window. She started sleeping with the lights on, installed cameras, told herself she was overreacting. Then came the third letter. This one was waiting on her pillow when she came home from work. The paper creased as if someone had clutched it too tightly. "Your bedroom light flickers. You should fix that." The words blurred as her vision swam. Her lights didn't flicker. They couldn't. She'd just replaced every bulb in the house. That night, she lay rigid in bed, eyes glued to the ceiling fixture. At 2:34 a.m., it happened. A sudden, violent sputter, the light dimming to a sickly glow before flaring back to life. In that pulse of darkness, she swore she saw a shape by the closet, a shadow that didn't belong. The next morning, she found the fourth letter taped to her bathroom mirror, the steam from her shower still clinging to the tiles. This one was different. No typed words, no careful script, just a single Polaroid, the edges slightly curled. It showed her bedroom, her bed, her asleep, the blankets tangled around her legs. The timestamp in the corner read 3:02 a.m. last night. The back of the photo was blank, except for two letters, scrawled in what looked like lipstick. "Hi." She didn't scream, didn't call the police, just slid down the wall until her knees hit the tile, the photo crumpling in her fist. Because now she understood. The letters weren't warnings. They weren't even really for her. They were a game, and he was proving he could play it anytime he wanted, even when her doors were locked, even when she was home. Sarah spent $387 on new locks, heavy-duty deadbolts with steel plating, the kind they used in banks. The installer joked about her being paranoid until she showed him the letters. Then, his smile faded. She added cameras too, one at the front door, another in the backyard, their tiny red lights blinking like watchful eyes through the night. For 3 days, nothing happened. Just the usual. Squirrels darting across the lawn, the mailman's predictable 11:07 a.m. arrival. Then, on Thursday evening, as she was washing dishes, her phone screamed with an alert. Motion detected. Backyard. The footage showed nothing at first, just the swaying branches of the oak tree, the shadows stretching long across the grass. Then something moved. Too fast to be an animal, too deliberate to be the wind. A shape darted past the edge of the frame, vanishing before the camera could refocus. Sarah's hands shook so badly, she dropped her phone. When she picked it up, the live feed was still, empty. But now there was a sound, a soft tap, 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 coming from the sliding glass door. She called the police before she even looked. Hid in the bathroom with Max growling low in his throat, her fingers clenched around pepper spray. The officers were polite but skeptical. No forced entry, no footprints in the flower beds, just a single perfect shoe print on the porch mat. Size 12, the tread pattern deep and fresh, with a distinctive zigzag groove along the sole. She'd seen those grooves before, on the boots her neighbor wore every morning as he sat watching her house. The cops left with promises to patrol the area, but their shrugs said it all. Maybe you imagined it. The next morning, the smell hit her first. Rich, dark, unmistakable. Coffee. Her stomach lurched as she stepped into the kitchen. The machine was on, steam curling from its spout. The carafe half full of black liquid. She hadn't used it in weeks, never even plugged it in after moving. And yet, there it was, humming softly, the digital display blinking 7:30 a.m., the exact time she usually left for work. On the counter beside it sat a single sugar packet, unopened, just the way she took her coffee. She didn't drink it, didn't pour it out either. Just stood there, staring at the swirling steam, realizing with icy clarity that locks and cameras didn't matter. He wasn't just watching, he was already inside. And the worst part, the coffee maker wasn't the only thing she'd forgotten to unplug. The back door's security alarm had been disabled. The tiny green light that should have glowed steady was dark. And when she checked the system history, there was no record of it ever being turned on. For 3 days after the cops left, the chair across the street sat empty. No coffee mug, no notebook, just an eerie stillness that made Sarah's skin crawl. By the 4th morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She waited until noon, when the neighborhood was at its quietest, then crossed the street, with her heart hammering so loud she feared he might hear it through the walls. The front door was locked, but the side window gave way with a gentle push. The old wood frame groaning in protest. The house smelled of dust and something faintly metallic, like old pennies. Furniture stood shrouded in white sheets, ghostly shapes in the dim light. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing floors so clean they looked polished. No footprints, no signs of life. Until she reached the back bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, a thin strip of yellow light bleeding through the crack. When she pushed it open, the smell hit her first. Sharp, chemical, like ammonia and something sweet underneath. The walls were a mosaic of photographs, meticulously arranged in chronological order. There she was, unpacking boxes on moving day, jogging in the park, sleeping with her face pressed against the couch cushions. But what made her legs give out were the other faces mixed in with hers. The young couple who'd lived there before her. Their smiling wedding photo circled in red. The elderly man who'd owned the house in the 90s. His image crossed out with black marker. Dozens of residents spanning decades, all captured in intimate moments they never knew were being watched. In the center of the collage, a single sticky note stood out against the sea of images. The handwriting was unmistakable, the same neat loops from the first letter. "I'll miss this view." Below it, taped to the wall, was a key. Her key. The one she'd kept hidden in the fake rock by the back porch. And beside it, a Polaroid she hadn't noticed before. It showed her standing in this very room, flashlight in hand, taken from somewhere behind her. The timestamp read 12:07 p.m. Today's date. right now. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. The smell of coffee drifted through the door. And suddenly, Sarah understood why the house was so spotless. He wasn't gone. He'd been waiting. Not in the house, not even across the street, but right behind her all along. Sarah didn't pack, just threw clothes into suitcases, left the furniture behind, and drove until her hands stopped shaking. The realtor's words played on loop in her mind as she signed the paperwork. "You're lucky to get out so fast. That house sat empty for nearly a decade before you moved in." She didn't mention the photos, the letters, the coffee maker turning itself on. The new family moving in looked so happy. A young couple with twin girls who immediately claimed the oak tree as their castle. Sarah almost warned them. Almost. But the words died in her throat when she saw their excitement. Let them be happy, she thought. Maybe whatever haunted that house only wanted her. The text came at 3:17 a.m. exactly. Her phone buzzing violently against the nightstand, the screen casting blue shadows across her new apartment walls. It was from an unknown number, but she knew. Somehow, she knew. The message was simple. "Missed you at the block party today. The new family makes great coffee." Below it, a photo attachment loaded slowly, pixel by pixel. First came the familiar porch, then the chair, then him. Same jacket, same smile, his hand raised in a wave that wasn't friendly. It was a promise. Sarah called the realtor at dawn, her voice cracking as she demanded answers. The response was ice in her veins. The property records show no residents since 2013. The previous owner died in that back bedroom. Heart attack, they said, though the neighbors swore they'd seen him screaming at an empty chair weeks before. She hung up before hearing more. That afternoon, she drove past the house one last time. The girls were playing in the yard, their laughter floating through the open windows. And there, just visible behind the kitchen curtains, was a shadow that stood too still to be the father. A shape that watched the children with shoulders squared in perfect mimicry of a living man. She texted the new owners just once. "Check your cameras, all of them." They never replied. But 2 weeks later, the listing popped up again. Price to sell, motivated seller. And the photo showed a freshly painted wall where Sarah knew the collage had been. The same wall where if you zoomed in, you could just make out the faint outline of words scratched into the drywall. 3 words written in something dark that the paint couldn't quite cover. "I see you."